If you're a veteran or military spouse of an early stage startup or small business and feel like you're making it up as you go, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to The Transition, where we demystify the entrepreneurial experience for veterans and military spouses who've already made or looking to make the transition from the military into entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Iron Mike Stedman, the voice of the bunker. I'm a Marine Corps veteran, social entrepreneur, and member of the Bunker Labs branding team. I tell people that it takes at least 3 years or so to fully transition from the military. That's not based off of any peer-reviewed research, only my personal experience after spending 10 years in the military, 5 including my time at the Naval Academy Prep School and Annapolis, followed by 5 years in the Marine Corps. Today's guest, Jessica van Dop DeJesus, left the Marine Corps as a lieutenant colonel in order to follow her passion for food and travel. Her first few years post-transition were rough, which she shares intimate details about for the first time on today's show. Through her struggles, Jessica managed to find meaning and purpose in this next stage of her journey as an author and solopreneur. She shares her story, and I hope that those of you in the throes of your own transition, whether you're just getting off of active duty, changing jobs, or making the leap to start a venture, I'm confident you'll find inspiration from today's show. Before we jump in, do me a favor and make sure you subscribe to the Transition newsletter at the link in the show notes. If there's a topic you'd like me to cover on the show or in the newsletter, shoot me an email at mike.stedman@bunkerlabs.org or message me directly on LinkedIn at Iron Mike Stedman. Applications are now open for the next cohort of Breaking Barriers in Entrepreneurship, a virtual program that facilitates business growth and support within Asian American, Pacific Islander, Black, Hispanic, and female veteran and military spouse communities. The 8-week program is designed to create an immediate impact for early to growth stage businesses by providing access to business tools, resources, capital opportunities, mentorship, and a strong peer network. If this sounds appealing to you, feel free to apply at the link in the show notes. Lastly, I want to encourage you to check out my first book, Black Veteran Entrepreneur. Validate your business model, build your brand, and step into greatness. Available on Amazon at the link in the show notes as well. This episode of The Transition is brought to you by MetLife Foundation and their commitment to supporting veteran and military spouse entrepreneurs. In addition, MetLife Foundation also provides mentorship and financial health resources to veterans and military spouses transitioning into the workforce. As always, I hope you enjoyed today's show and that accelerates you on your own entrepreneurial journey. Ma'am, welcome to The Transition. I got to say, ma'am, y'all, she was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. I got out as a captain. She outranks me. So I got to show my respect. How are you doing today, Jess? So happy to have you on The Transition. Finally, know we had to reschedule a couple times, but I didn't even realize you were in Belgium.
I'm doing outstanding. Thank you so much for having me.
I had my admin reach out to Jess to get her scheduled, and she was freaking out because she thought we were going to be on video. She was like, oh, I got to get my hair done. Everybody thinks video podcasting is a new thing, but it creates a whole level of complexity when you're trying to schedule a guest, y'all. People do not want to be on camera because, to be honest, a lot of us that are entrepreneurs, people are beat up during the day.
Yeah.
Then they got to, right? They're trying to squeeze this podcast in between meetings and whatever else. And they're like, look, I can't today. I can't be on camera today.
And I mean, I'm Puerto Rican. So at the end of the day, I was like, I have to have, at least my hair done, some lipstick, to just in case, this video makes it out in the real world. So.
So I'm excited to have you here. And I would love for you to introduce yourself to our listeners. Tell them about what you've got going on, both within the Latinx Bunker Labs cohort for the Breaking Barriers and Entrepreneurship, and also the Dine-In Traveler.
Yeah, so I'm the founder of the Dining Traveler, and it's a multimedia platform. We do copy, video, and photography, all centered in the hospitality business, food and travel. I'm a publisher. I have a website called diningtraveler.com where we share tips on food and travel, and everything that we publish is something that we've experienced personally, myself or my team. So, it's like firsthand accounts. We also produce video, and I do a combination of cooking video, interviews, and also destination-centered videos. And I've been doing Dining Travelers since 2015. With Bunker Labs, I'm the Latinx facilitator for our Breaking Barriers in Entrepreneurship program, and basically work kind of as a coach, coaching our cohort and organizing speakers and making sure that our entrepreneurs and a lot of people are in different stages of their journey just to make sure that they get something out of the experience.
That's amazing. You know what's interesting about our community? So I live by this motto of lift as we climb. And I tell
Mhm.
people, what's the point of making it to the mountaintop if you're the only one there? But
Yep.
there's so many of us facilitating these different cohorts and groups. We got families to take care of. We got our own damn businesses to run. But there's something about vets helping vets or military spouses, helping other military spouses in the veteran community at large. Where do you think that comes from? Is it just our background? Is it just how we're built? Is it that sense of purpose beyond ourselves? I'm curious to hear your thoughts.
I think that for my experience as a Marine, I retired after 24 years of service, is that family when there's nobody else around. I was stationed overseas. I was in Okinawa, I was in Germany. And, just kind of looking to each other when your families or your friends from back in the day are not around. And I think that we have that common experience. In many ways, we speak a language that the common folk doesn't. And I have a great combination of what I call like my civilian friends and my military friends, but there's something about that shared experience in the military that immediately gives to me somebody credibility to be able to help them. And I think that for many of us who are in the military, we are selfless people because many of us could have gone out, made more money somewhere else, and we chose this lifestyle beyond the steady paycheck. We chose it because there's something about serving that we love.
I I find it fascinating too that you're even making time to do this all the way out in Belgium. I was like, you're facilitating a cohort from out in Belgium, man. That's amazing.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I was volunteering actually for 2 years with Bunker Labs doing a digital marketing and social media workshop. And I have to say, and Renee was the facilitator for the women and the Latinx cohort. And I would always tell Renee after our calls, I always text her and I'm like, I feel so invigorated after I give that presentation. And I've done this presentation in many other venues, but there is something about talking to veterans and at the end of the Q&A session, we have to like cut it off because people are so genuinely like interested and engaged. And it just, for me, like I leave learning more, even as a facilitator, even while I'm giving my workshop is for, I get as much out of it as they give me.
It's funny you say that too, because when you were at our lowest, right? Or sometimes you find yourself stuck. I was doing some research online one day, and I want to call him a mentor of mine, but he has these videos where he teaches like leadership stuff. And one of the things he talked about was the way to get unstuck is you just help somebody else who is like 2 to 3 steps behind you. So you've kind of already gone through that path a little bit. You just make some time and you help them. I will have days, y'all, where I'm literally beat up. You know, those days where you get all excited about the prospect and you don't hear from them no more,
Mhm.
or you're just going through it. And then I'll teach a class just to some random group of veteran entrepreneurs and military spouses. I feel like I can conquer the world after that. And it goes back to that because I do think there's something about putting that positive energy out in the universe. And then it just gets reciprocated in so many different ways, whether I feel better or somebody, it will attract a lead or just all these opportunities pop up. So I make time to do it. I did it yesterday for a group of young incarcerated men and women and gave a class on entrepreneurship, which was facilitated by another veteran. So I think it's just great to see so many of us out here in the community pouring back into it.
Yeah, I agree. And one of the things that I did this summer was sit down and really focus on what my purpose is. And doing, obviously we're entrepreneurs, we have to make money and put food on the table, but what is my purpose? Because I can go and work at any tech company and make money, so I'm a retired telecom officer, but what do I do in my purpose? And one of the three words that I came up with were educate, empower, and connect. And connecting is like one of my favorite things to do because I love, like, if I see an opportunity that pops up and it doesn't fit me, like I immediately think, and it could be a somebody that I didn't talk to like that I haven't talked to in like a year or two, but I'm like, oh man, I know this person's gonna be perfect for this job. So I'm gonna refer them. And I love getting like that email. It's like, hey, I got that contract, or times are tough and somebody came through. But there is a beauty in being able to use your resources and being able to use your connections in order to empower others. So for me, that's a big one.
So what I want to do now is ask you to get vulnerable and take off your armor for our listeners. But I got two questions on that. Number one, I think it's interesting how, like, when I go to the Naval Academy, people always assume that because you go to a service academy, you've got life figured out, and then we transition out and it's all sunshine and rainbows. Now, I had a good transition, but I talked to peers of mine, in the ecosystem, and people are really struggling out there. And I feel like you can relate to that too, because, you get out of the Marine Corps as a lieutenant colonel. So people probably assume, like, oh man, you're good to go. So I'm curious to know how your transition has been treating you. And then also, how's your entrepreneurial journey been going and what's keeping you up at night?
So for me, my transition, I have to say, has been interesting because when I look back and I connect the dots, I should have gotten out before the time that I did, like being completely frank. And I didn't do it because it was tied to my entrepreneurship journey. At the time, I was a reservist. Like, times got a bit rough. I know I can go on orders, make some extra money. I also got my reserve healthcare through it, which was like $200 a month versus like over 1,000 I would have had to pay as a self-employed person. So all these little things, I felt like they were good because they were safety nets, but at the same time, there were crutches holding me back because even though I was a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps and I was doing, some meaningful work, I no longer identified with being a lieutenant colonel in the Marine Corps. And I think that a lot of folks, they stick around or, longer than their time is. And I always used to tell my Marines, like, if you want to get out after 4 years, I'm not going to make you stay because, we need people like you to get out happy and to go out in the world and to tell people that the Marine Corps is a great thing. You just did it for 4 years and you moved on. And then, 21 years later, I feel like, I'm not listening to myself. And so for me, like I felt like and I work in media and I work in food and travel media, was just completely different from the Marine Corps. So it's kind of like having like this dual life to the point that I would get a bit of anxiety when it was like time to, put the uniform back on because I felt like I had a code switch into a completely different person. So my transition has, and also so my transition was a bit complicated in many ways because when I was retiring, it was like at the height of COVID. So, I couldn't go and like, I couldn't go to my unit. Like so it was very lonely. And I remember that a friend of mine, even before COVID, he told me he retired as an E8. And he was like, Jessica, like when you retire, you would think that everybody's going to come and look for you. And it's like you retire and the Marine Corps goes on, and you're just like, a faint memory. You might have your buddies from, back in the day or whatever. And I think that a lot of people, it's very tough to reconcile that, right? Especially if you did 20 plus years and you're a senior officer, senior non-commissioned officer, senior NCO, it is very difficult to be like, oh my God, I'm here alone. I have nothing to back me up now. And I think that that transition and not having that safety net in a way has forced me saying, okay, well, I have no other choice. I need to go out there and it's actually challenged me more as an entrepreneur because now I don't have the excuse that I can go back to the Pentagon and work for 6 months on orders and make some good money. So I think that has been, the big, and also moving to a foreign country. So I had retired from the Marine Corps, living in DC in that, very military ecosystem, to moving to Europe where I don't know anyone in the military and speaking a foreign language and just doing something that is completely removed from my Marine Corps experience.
I think I tell people all the time, I think it takes 3 years of transition.
Mhm.
So like 3 years to
Oh,
kind of be
well,
like,
more to
okay,
go.
this is me. Okay, I'm kind of getting my own little style and my own little flavor. But again, technically I was in 15 years.
Mhm.
No, was it 15 years? 10 years, sorry. 5 years at the Naval
Okay.
Academy because I had to go to prep school, y'all. I wasn't smart enough to go
Mhm.
right away. And then 4 years, sorry, 5 years at the Naval Academy and prep school, and then 5 years as a Marine infantry officer.
Okay.
So then I got out. But I'd say it took like 3 years. I can only imagine, man. And going through COVID, transitioning, becoming an entrepreneur, moving into another country. I'm just like, that would just be a lot to handle. But it seems like I mean, you're glowing, right? You're living your best
Now.
life. I'm sure it's challenging. She said, now, y'all. What has been the hardest part of being an entrepreneur thus far, though? What's keeping you up with that?
I think it's the loneliness. I think that one of the reasons why I took this opportunity with Bunker Labs was because I loved being in that community. And I have to say that I started a few, like 3 months ago, and I can already tell like the change in my demeanor, my optimism has changed because I have to admit the first year was really, really hard. I was already an entrepreneur, like I was already doing Dining Traveler and getting some good contracts. And, obviously my core business is hospitality, restaurants, hotels. Well, what happened in 2020? And I had just scored a pretty big contract with a hotel. And what happened? Boom, COVID happened. I had to chase people down for money. And it was something like in many ways, very traumatic, and ended up getting a job, a regular civilian job again, that ended really, really badly. And I'll give you guys like a little story time here because this goes back to the why, if Mike will permit. So at Code, because it'll go back to like, when we talk about transition. So, and I think it's really important for us to know our whys, right? So when COVID started, my contracts all went to shit. I'm sorry for the language.
No, there's no
Um,
rules. There's no rules in audio,
okay.
y'all. We good. We good.
So
This is the
all my
bumper.
contracts went away. So I started working for a company doing media work behind the scenes, more like, booking talent and contracting. So I was brought in to be a project manager. I'm like, cool, I've been a Marine officer for so long. I'm a project manager. And it ended up being more like I was a glorified secretary. And even though like the money was decent, we were in the pandemic, but it was just not a good fit for me. And then I ended up getting fired with no previous warning. So no performance plan, no, hey, we need to talk about your performance. We're not happy with this. And it was like in the height of COVID where we would be in calls for 7 hours out of the 8-hour workday. So I had a toddler at home. So it was just like a lot of factors. And I remember that the person that fired me, I called her. She didn't even turn on the camera to tell me like, hey, we're giving the position to internally to somebody else in the company because I was hired as a temporary employee. And, I was angry. I was like, we were in the pandemic. My mental health was suffering. And I told her, I was like, how could you do this to me? Like, you haven't even turned on your camera. And she's like, well, I wasn't happy. And I was like, and I come from this Marine Corps environment, right? Where we have a Marine, we have a plan, we have adverse fitness reports that you have to kind of justify, like with tangible proof that somebody's not performing. And I went from somebody not even remotely telling me that they weren't happy with my performance to firing me. So, I got kind of Marine Corps on her, and the temp company was like, oh, we'll give you 2 weeks of severance. So this woman was so angry that I confronted her that she took my severance away from me. So I got a call like 15 minutes after that phone call with her. And the lady from the temp company was like, yeah, they're not going to pay you the 2 week severance. So this is not,
Yeah.
and I was so angry. But again, like my Marine part of me, I'm like, I'm not going to take this lying down. I sent my boss's boss a message and I'm like, we're in a pandemic. I was like, you can look through my emails. I never got a performance plan. I never got anything. Like this woman just got rid of me. And then, to top it all off, got rid of my severance. So, and at that moment, and then I guess that she, took it up the chain and I got my severance back 2 weeks, which was nothing. But at that day, and I remember it was like a Tuesday evening, that day I made a pledge to myself. I was like, I will never work in a corporate environment again. And thankfully, knock on wood, I didn't even have to apply for unemployment because it motivated me, put some fire on my butt to produce a video series, and that was very successful. Didn't have to claim unemployment, and and I'm still here. So some good months, some bad months, but to me, that's my why. Just like the thought that I would have to go back to that environment where somebody will mess with your livelihood and not even turn on the camera and look at you in the face.
That
It is
that
my why.
that drives me crazy. Cut your
And
damn camera
I've never
on.
shared this story publicly, by the way. I've
Well,
shared it amongst friends. So but this is my first time going on the record sharing this story.
we appreciate you. This is a space to be vulnerable. This is art.
Mhm.
You're amongst family. This is your tribe.
Yeah.
There's a lot of landmines out there. We got to help each other navigate them. But
Yeah.
this civilian world of not being confrontational, not wanting to look at people in the eye, it's so just, y'all, it's terrible. Oh, they're scared of Iron Mike.
It's
Okay,
interesting.
though.
And it's interesting because, as a we're both Marine officers. It's like, if we want to give somebody an adverse fitness report, we need to like sit in front of that person and be like, I am going to give you an adverse report for X, Y, and Z. And if you don't do that, you can't give the person an adverse fitness report. Or so for me, like the fact that somebody's willing to completely cut your livelihood and not giving you tangible proof as to why they're doing that is for me it was like an eye-opening moment because I worked as a civilian but for the federal government, for NATO, so it was like a completely different world for me. But at that moment I pledged, I'm like, I don't care if I have to work 14 hours and be an entrepreneur, but I'm never going to do this again.
How did you deal with the confidence aspect of it? Because here you are, this lieutenant colonel, got the first job, not your first job, but you're working in the pandemic and you get fired. And this is like going into your entrepreneurial journey, to the next level. How did you bounce back from that?
I was really mad that day. And I just didn't, I was like, we're in the middle of a pandemic. We live in DC, so we can't live on a one income household. And I was like, I need to make money. Like there's not no ifs and buts. I need to make money. So I really didn't, for me at that time, I didn't even have time to be sad about it. I was like, let me go into my email, check my Rolodex, see who I can ask for sponsorship to produce a series.
And at what point did you realize that the dine and travel is going to be self-sustainable for you?
For me, I started in 2015, and one of the things that my husband, when we talked about me leaving my job at the Pentagon because I was a GS-13 plus a reservist in the Marine Corps, he was like, "Well, that's awesome." He's Dutch, so he's very numbers oriented, and he was like, "Do a business plan and show how you can replace the income that you're making at the Pentagon with doing the dining traveler." So one of the things that I did was diversify what we do in the dining traveler. So it's not like just, oh, I'm an influencer, I'm getting paid to do Instagram posts, but I do a lot of back end work like social media management, social media strategy. Now I'm doing media kits, so food photography. So there's all these different things that I do within the dining traveler umbrella. So if I know that, 1 month, one thing is kind of dried up, like I know I can pick it up somewhere else. So for me, like it was 2015, and I would say like around 2019 when I launched my book, I knew that this was something that I can sustain.
I launched a book last year, telling it last year, I think it was like October, but writing it was way harder than I thought. I had to fight some demons to get that book published, y'all. Like I
Yeah.
could hear, and I realized like this is why people don't publish,
Mhm.
because you want it to be so perfect. You want it to be right. But at a certain point, you just got to push. You got to set that
Yeah.
hard deadline and say, rain, sleet, hell, or snow, I'm committing to getting this book out. But man, it was such a journey. How was your book experience?
My book, like it took us 4 years to produce our book because, my
Wow.
book is a hardcover coffee table book, very photography heavy. So I work with a photographer, I work with a designer, I work with an editor. So we had like this team of people. So, and everybody, this was kind of like their side hustle. So trying to figure out when everybody had time to do things. This book was about Puerto Rico in 2017. There was Hurricane Maria, this devastating. So I was actually getting ready to do the final edits to send it to the publishers, and then this hurricane happens. So in 2018, I had to go back to Puerto Rico a few times, do some more interviews, shoot more photos. So it was then my husband got laid off. I ended up going back on active duty for a year. So it was just kind of like this snowball of things that had happened. And but I look back and I'm like, that was the time that I needed to network, to find the right people. And I look back and I'm like, is my book perfect at that time? It was perfect for me. But now I look back, I was like, oh, I could have added this or I could have added that. But I think it goes back to what you said is like, you have to pull the trigger at some point and follow through.
So I was thinking about this analogy the other day, and I feel like I could finally talk to somebody about it, Marine to Marine. So in the infantry, right, or at the basic school, when we're teaching how to clear houses, they always stress about maintaining momentum going through the breach, right?
Yeah.
Because you can get clogged up. As soon as you kick the door in, you get shot at, you start taking casualties, yada, yada, yada. But the Marine Corps is like push. You know, the
Yeah.
instructors will come behind you and push you through the door. Like, there's so many times where you have to push as an entrepreneur, you
Yeah.
know, because if the you can just there's just roadblocks all around. And if you don't maintain momentum, you'll come into a dead halt. So just like you
Yeah.
said, you know, you go through this one issue, then your husband gets laid off. So there's all these different reasons in the world of not to get this book out. And that's why a lot of y'all listening to this aren't able to launch those ventures or get those projects out the door because you're not being aggressive. You got to push, man. I know it sounds rough, but like it's a constant thing. You know, we're doing this video series for a TV show. What do you think is they're dealing with right now? The actor strike,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
They raised all this money, produced this veteran entrepreneurship TV show, and now here's another giant roadblock. So it's like, what are they going to do about it? You know, the producers and everything.
And I think that for me, what I've learned from this experience, especially with the book, is that we think of at that moment, you're like, crap, like this didn't happen on this date. But then you look back, and I love what Steve Jobs talks about, connecting the dots, and you connect your dots and you're like, oh, this book needed to be published at that time, at that particular time. Or, for example, I think of COVID and what happened to me. And I was like, oh, okay, I made those cooking videos that ended up being very successful but if I would have made them 3 years ago, they would have not had the same level of success. So I think that we look back in that moment, it's like, oh, why didn't I do this sooner? But I'm a believer that everything happens like in divine timing. And sometimes like you don't think about it that way, like because you're like, why is this happening to me? But I do think, and in those moments, like for me, I struggled when I first moved to Belgium. Like the first year was really, really tough for me, navigating two different worlds, still keeping all my stuff in DC, trying to break in here, trying to get used to the language again. And after a year, I was like, okay, I got my footing back up and I started, doing more things and writing for more publications. And my mother dies last November. So and it's like, I don't know if you ever ran a marathon, but it's like, imagine like, you're running, you hit the wall and you're like, oh, I got my second win. And then it's like mile 25, somebody trips you and you fall. And
Yeah.
that's how I felt last November when my mother passed away. But again, you look back and you're like, yeah, that's life. And you have to kind of roll with it. And now I kind of feel like I'm back to, and I think that being a facilitator at BBIE has done a huge effect for me, because being in this group where people, like-minded people, being able to have these amazing speakers that talk about their journey, and also not only talk about their journey, but actually give you actionable steps on, how to get ahead in your business has helped me out a ton.
I appreciate you being vulnerable once again because we don't talk enough about life. You know, life is still happening while we're trying to build these ventures, while you're head down on your little laptop at the coffee shop, you know, living your little best digital nomad life. People are dying, they're getting sick. It's all this kind of stuff. And you unplug from the matrix and you get reminded real quick, like, oh man, I'm getting older too. You know, all
Yeah.
this stuff is going on. It's just a hell of a journey, man. I try to tell people this is a journey. You know, I just even for myself, right? I think about I lost a frat brother of mine who was super close with, and that wrecked me. That like wrecked me.
I'm
It threw
sorry.
me all off my game because it's like the best way I can describe it is we're all carrying a lot of stuff with us, right?
Mhm.
And people see us, but there's just the slightest thing can make the train go off the track,
Yeah.
right? And then you throw in a death, a sickness, or something,
Mhm.
and then now it's like the simplest things just become like almost unbearable, you know? Like trying to go open the boxing gym while I'm thinking about my brother who passed away, you know, trying to think about going to this storage facility. It's just a lot. So how did you come out of that? What did you do to allow you to get back to yourself?
I think it's taking time to, in the beginning, I was like, no, I'm going to keep on working because, that will keep me busy. But I knew deep down that that was not the holiday, because my mom passed away in November. Then the holidays happened. So it was like a lot. I live in Belgium. So my mom actually had her last breath when I was on the plane on my way home to say goodbye. So it was very quick. Like she got COVID and died 3 weeks later, and it was completely unexpected, so for us. And but I also think about, like, my mom was, she was a baddie. Like she came to the States when she was 11 years old, taught herself English. Like in upstate New York, there's like no brown people in upstate New York. So they were getting called all sorts of names, and she got through it, and she raised four amazing kids, and, how to deal with domestic abuse and a lot of other, stuff that I thankfully was never exposed to. And, you just think, okay, people, like we're our ancestors' wildest dreams, and I think that keeps me, that pushes me, because I know that my mom would be like, dust yourself off and, do what you got to do. So for me, like, in many ways, it's like the cause of my mom is like the cause of my grief, but she's also the cause of my motivation.
Now, I know we've talked about some challenging times you've had to go through. Share with us some of your latest wins.
I think my latest wins are getting back into the saddle. I just finished, well, we just wrapped up a video series in Sicily, in Italy. So we were there for 10 days filming, and have this amazing friend that helped us produce it. So we were in restaurants, like, I was like speaking Spanish as these chefs were speaking Italian to me. We were shooting, and we just had this amazing experience that a lot of people probably wouldn't have access to, just because of the way, especially in Sicily, people are very tight knit. So if you don't know somebody that knows somebody, like, you can get into these kitchens. So for me, that was like extremely special to have that opportunity to shoot it. We just launched our first video yesterday on YouTube, and we've been getting some really good responses. So for me, that's a great win, because it's the first time in since the end of 2021 that I was able to bring my videographer from New York to help me shoot. So it was a win for me to wrap it up, and now getting ready to promote it, and producing an ebook as an ebook guidebook to southeastern Sicily. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No, I was saying, see, the thing I like about you though, and I was just having a conversation with another veteran about this. I think sometimes vets can get caught up in speculative business ideas. So
Mhm.
we're like, oh, crypto, we should do this, or AI, we should do this. Do you even have a background doing it? Like, what knowledge, experience, connections do you bring? Yeah, this sounds like a good business idea, but like, why are you the one to solve this problem? When I look at the dining traveler, when I hear your stories, this is not out of your wheelhouse. I mean, it's like this is what you were meant to do. Sure, there's some different things you have to learn with editing film and
Yeah.
photography and yada yada yada, but you already have the passion for food and travel,
Mhm.
etc. So you're actually playing to your strengths. And I think more of us as entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, right, we need to play to our strengths, because when the times get rough, that you gotta have something that you can, lean on. So I even think about, like, how do you keep a boxing gym open for a year and a half in the middle of a pandemic? Well, it helps that I'm a boxer and I'm super passionate about it and I'm determined to figure it out. But this was a space I didn't know anything about.
Yeah.
It would have been a wrap.
And I think that, and one of the things that, especially being veterans, that helps us running a business, because, of course, like, I'm a good writer, I'm a great writer, great photographer, but, that's not what a business makes, right? And I think that, especially being a Marine, and being a woman Marine, being a Latina Marine, there was a lot of work that I had to do to stand out, or a lot of work that, I would be actually at staff meetings, and I would say something, and it would be overlooked, and like some white dude like would say it 5 minutes later, and they're like, oh, that's a great idea, and I'm like, I just said that. Like, I mean, these were things that I went through as a Marine. So I think that for me to have my own brand, that for me, I fierce, it's like I have a real baby, and this is my other baby, and I will defend it to the end, because I think that for me is something that I had to fight to, just like my Marine Corps career, I keep on fighting to keep and maintain. And I think that also as a Marine, as if you don't evolve, you're not going to get promoted. Like, you have to do your PMEs, you have to do, your CFTs, like, you have to do your PFTs, and and as you get older, you might not be the fastest, but it's like the survival of the fittest. Like, there's a lot of dudes I went to TBS with that would be like, oh, Jessica, you're so slow. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm now, I've made it 24 years of service, and where are you? So I think is, having that skin in the game, and I'm not a sprinter, I'm a marathon runner. And I think that my experience as a Marine has really taught me that.
Did you feel pressure being such a high rank, feeling like you had to go into a certain career path or a certain industry as an entrepreneur?
I felt
Because
that.
you think about a lot of lieutenant colonels and, senior flag officers, what do? Government, you know, big tech, etc. And here you are, making Instagram videos.
And I think that because I did that, I was a GS-13 at the Pentagon, and I worked at a unit that the work was boring as hell, but I worked with some amazing people. And I think that was one of the reasons why I didn't quit sooner, because, fun dudes, that I used to work with even back in the day when they were in uniform, they retired, they went into this. I left my job at 2015. I joined that reserve unit as a Marine, as in uniform. That was like the last duty station that I was with. And some of the same dudes were there that when I started that job in 2012, they were there doing the same job. And I know that obviously, the Marine Corps is not for everybody, and it's very draining, and and if that's your path, you do you. I do struggle sometimes having to explain to people. They're like, but what do you really do? Or they think that, my husband's like supporting me. And I'm like, no, like he's Dutch, he's not going to support me. And, or, that having these speculations. And I think that if you go to work like at Amazon, nobody's going to ask you how you make your money. But I find myself in many situations where people, especially, people that don't look like me, feel at liberty to be like, well, how do you make your money? Or it must be nice that you get to travel. And I'm a firm believer, my first time I went to Belgium and came here to 2016 or 2006, I had a student visa, 2 suitcases, and my GI Bill. And I did not know a single soul. All I knew in French was bonjour, merci. And I made a life here, and I got a job at NATO. And, and people say luck, but I don't believe in luck, because I've literally fought tooth and nail for everything that I've had.
I don't think people still understand what I do. They're like, "What do you? We see you here, we see you there. None of your business,
None of
man.
your,
We alive. We
exactly.
out here. We out here.
Unless
You
you
worry
want to
about
pay me to do
Amazon."
something, I was like, do you need a food photographer? Do you need somebody to
Yeah.
get your website going? I'm your girl, but, stop asking questions unless you're willing to pay me something, for my services.
Yeah, go worry about your manager. Don't be worrying about us.
Exactly.
I swear. So there's a wine store in my building, y'all. When I first quit my job and got royally punched in the face, I walked in that wine store and I was looking around. I was like, "Hey, do you guys need a website?" I built like a $500 website on Squarespace, but it was money,
Yep.
and it felt good to sell something. But you're right. Like, as we just figured out, it's just a different lifestyle. I try to describe to people. It's like hunting every day.
Yeah.
It's like almost primitive, right? You got to wake up and you got to figure out like how you're going to put food on the table for yourselves and your loved ones. And you develop these skill sets that you're able to monetize. And people like us also think about, instead of just having one core skill set, right? We diversify, right?
Exactly.
So that way, when COVID shuts one opportunity down, you pivot into another opportunity. Or, hey, we want to make sure we're protected cash flow at all times. So we do a little of this, we do a little of that, but we make it all work.
And I think that, and that goes back to not also having that sixth sense of like the people that you choose to work with. And I think that in the beginning, I would be like, oh, I'm going to take everything, because you're just kind of like in this scarcity mentality. But now, like, I've created a number for myself, depending on the services that I do. And, I'll have people reach out to me like, oh, I want you to do like an influencer campaign. But if it's under my number, I would just be like, no. And some people are
Yeah.
like, oh, okay, I'll give you this much. But I think that in our space, we have to learn how to, I mean, any like independent space, you have to learn how to negotiate. But then there are people that I met a guy who, a restaurant owner, wanted me to run his like marketing and his email marketing. And I just did not have the best gut feeling about this dude. Like there was just something that I was like, eh. And I was like, I just have a lot on my plate. I didn't end it in a sour note, but I was like, I was like, I'm not gonna pursue this further. And a year later, I find out that one of my friends has him as a client, and he's getting sued because he owes them $50,000. So, and he hasn't paid. And I was like, I knew it. I knew. And I think that that's one of our things that, especially as military folks, folks that have, study warfare, like, you build that sixth sense, and, making sure that you don't have the scarcity mentality cloud your sixth sense in business, because I've had it happen in the past. I'm like, oh my God, it's a client, it's money. And then it just ends up badly. So I think as you grow as an entrepreneur, you start figuring out like, what are those red flags to look out for?
I tell people values. That's why you need to sit
Mhm.
down and create your core values, your individual values, and do not work with people that don't share the same values as you. Because when
Mhm.
times get rough and people's true colors start to show, you don't want to be trapped or tied in with someone for the long term. And that's a lesson I thankfully learned early on, so I didn't have to deal with anything too crazy. But it goes back to what we talked about at the very beginning of, me being a veteran. I kind of got a fun personality, right? I don't take myself too serious, but I also don't put myself in positions where people won't take me for me, you know?
Mhm.
So a lot of the content and everything that I put out, it's like what you see is what you get. So I want to attract the right kind of
Mhm.
customers, the right kind of partners that let me show up my full self and I don't have to worry about, you know, their values being off.
And I think that, and it's interesting that you say that because for me, one of my biggest things when I retired was wanting to be, my authentic self. And I tell people sometimes this anecdote that, towards the end of my career, I have, very curly hair and, having to go into the Pentagon and like, change into my camis, because obviously you can't be out in camis in the Marine Corps. So you're in this bathroom and then I have to pin my curls back into a bun, and it sounds like the most trivial thing, but it was just like, that is a part of me that I can no longer, have out. Like, I don't know. It's just very, for people that, haven't been in it, it's difficult to explain, but I will always cherish. I mean, I always tell people I would not be where I am now if it would have not been for the Marine Corps. Like, I am the dining traveler because of the Marine Corps. But at the same time, I'm my authentic Jessica Marie Van Dop DeJesus because I'm out of the Marine Corps now. And, going back to values, like I can also talk about my personal values more freely, no, given that I no longer am in uniform. And I teach this also in our branding social media class, that I feel that people now, like your audience, like the people that buy from you, a lot of these brands, even if you're a big corporate brand, people want to know your values and where you stand. And it can be, and I'm not trying to make a political statement, it could be to the left, to the right, whatever, because you're going to find an audience wherever. But I think that you have to be very clear in where it is that you stand.
Some of our highest downloaded podcasts on the show are just solo episodes of me riffing. I'm stumbling, I'm figuring it out while I'm trying to teach some content or something. But you're right, people are hungry for that.
Mhm.
They wanna get to know real people and where they stand. And I think for a lot of us as veterans too, we create impact in our local communities in a way that is hard to conceptualize when you're around a bunch of Marines and y'all are wearing the same uniform and y'all all eating at the same chow spot. But then you're in a community, they see you moving, they're like, oh, he's a Marine, she's a Marine, you know, and they see what's possible, right? So we like, yeah, we're like everyone else, but we're also different. We bring something to the table. And I think when we're our true, authentic selves and we're Marines and we're entrepreneurs, right? It just hits different,
Yeah.
So I want to encourage you all out there as you do jump into this entrepreneurial ecosystem, man, be yourself. Find others that want you because that's the benefit of being a civilian, right? You don't have to, what's the word I'm looking for? You don't have to, I don't know, be vanilla, right? Like it's
Yeah.
okay to be tropical. You can, find yourself too, right?
Yeah.
That's the other thing, right? You served your country, you did what you're supposed to. Now out here in the civilian world, don't be afraid to kind of let your light shine a little bit. It's okay.
And I also tell people, I'm like, there's a billion active users on social media. Like when I teach my social media class, like you're not trying to get a billion followers. Like, you're not Cristiano Ronaldo, you're not Kylie Jenner. You have a specific niche and you can find your community in that, whether it's 1,000 people or 100,000 people. But I feel that they are like-minded people that you can connect with anywhere as long as you are your authentic self. And I do think that there is an importance in being vulnerable because especially talking about social media, talking about media, like we can be on this podcast and talk about like, oh my God, everything has been great. And every opportunity has landed on our lap. And for a long time, I mean, only like 5 people knew I had been fired from a job. And then I started talking more and more about it, amongst my group, of friends and acquaintances when the opportunity came up. Or somebody's like, man, I got laid off. And I'm like, listen, it gets better. This happened to me. So I think that there is some value. And then you have people saying, you know what, Jess, like you said this. And I'm like, it does get better, in that moment where you don't think that things get better. But I think that with sharing the good, we also have to share our challenges and be vulnerable, because you never know who's listening on the other side that needs to read that and needs to identify with that as well.
That reminds me, I need to write a post about sharing L's because I'm in a coaching group, y'all, and it always appears people are killing it, right, Jess? You know, you post on so they're like, "Oh man, you're killing it," but you know, you get in the habit of only sharing the good stuff. Sometimes you gotta share the bad
I
stuff to
share
give
all sorts
people
of stuff.
the encouragement. But I'm part of this coaching group, and I need to write some stuff in there because people always think I'm killing it. I'm not at all. You know, sometimes people just catch me on a good day.
Yeah.
But as we start to close out here, I got a couple more questions for you. Number one, what is your big, hairy, audacious goal? Like, what are you working towards, both from a business level and a personal level? And then number two, I want to ask you to leave our listeners with some words of encouragement.
My ultimate goal is to be a multimedia publisher, produce TV shows, films that center in global travel, and also publish books, and not only my own books, but especially seeing BIPOC publishers in the food and travel industry and being able to publish and promote their work.
And what about words of encouragement for our listeners? How
It
can they
gets
support you on accomplishing that BHAG?
Well, follow me at Dining Traveler, and I'm on all platforms. So, which if you're a TikTok type of person, I'm there. If you're an Instagram type of person, and it's the same handle, Dining Traveler. If you're a budding entrepreneur, apply for BBIE and Bunker Labs. We would love to have you. And thirdly, words of encouragement is it gets better. And I think to have a clear vision of what you want, and it's taken me years to develop, what my purpose is, what my why is, and I think that life experiences create those whys for you. But think about that purpose and that why every day, and that will make you get out of bed.
Well, Jessica, it's been an honor to have you on the platform. Listen, y'all, when you do decide to make that leap, if you're already in a fight, you do not have to go at it alone. We got so many I mean, the emails I saw go out from Bunker Labs the other day, I hit up the director of marketing. I was like, the amount of support we're pushing out is applauded, right? Like
Yeah.
between the small business finance mini series we just launched. You've got the BBAE cohorts going on. You got the veteran and residence cohorts going on. You got CEO Circle. You got ambassadors, shaking hands and kissing babies in the local community,
Mhm.
bringing the community out. So you have a lot of support and resources, y'all. And it's just such a pleasure to be able to talk to amazing entrepreneurs like Jessica and also create this content to support y'all out there. So please make sure you take advantage of it. Head to bunkerlabs.org. To top you'd like me to cover on the show, feel free to reach out to me via email at mike.stedman@bunkerlabs.org or message me directly on LinkedIn at Iron Mike Stedman. Until next time, peace, love, and have a great rest of your week.